There we go. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for another episode, whatever time you choose to listen to, of Move, Breathe, Live with me, Wibbs Coulson. Today, I am super stoked to welcome Ryan Hurst, who some of you will know, some of you might not know. Ryan, I'm going to kind of chuck it over to you to introduce yourself, because I feel that probably guests are better at introducing themselves than I am. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how people might know you, and then perhaps we can dive in from there.
All right. Fabulous. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure.
So yes, I would try and do an abbreviated version of what's going on. I am co-founder. I'm a co-founder and the head coach of a little company called GMB Fitness. We have been around for a little over 11 years now, just quite a while in the internet business, especially in the fitness world we're at. Originally started off, in the fitness world. I've been in the fitness world for quite some time now. I'm 49 years old. And again, I've been in the fitness world for seems like forever. Started off with gymnastics when I was about 5 years old. And I've been doing things ever since then. Gymnastics and martial art is really my background. Martial art is still my passion. I live in Japan. I've been in Japan for about 28 years now. Came over for martial art. Again, I'm still doing martial art here in Japan, but coming back to GMB Fitness. GMB Fitness is a little different than the typical place that you might hear when you hear fitness. We're not about necessarily body reconstruction or things like that. We're simply looking at helping you to improve your physical autonomy. And basically what that means to us is just really focus on what you need in order to feel better and move better for the things that matter to you in your life. That's really it. The way that we do it is simply by using various movements that focus on strength, flexibility, and control. And we do that by using our methodology, which is looking at the 5 Ps, which we can talk about, as well as our assessment system, to make sure that we're focusing on, again, your why. And so it's not about six-pack abs. It's not about getting huge. It's not about anything like that. It's really focusing on what's going to be good for you and how we can just better help you to further enjoy the things that you're already doing in your life that matter to you.
Amazing. And it's one of the things I've loved so much about the GMB program. And, I've dived in and out of it because throughout the time, sort of playing with vitamin quite a lot, like your program, the vitamin sequence. Because I'm a very much a body weight type person. And one of the things I've loved about the GMB program, if you like, is how obviously there's a lot of online internet stuff you can do for home fitness, home whatever else, but actually the GMB side of things I liked was it was all a little bit different body weight stuff, i.e. you took in elements of the martial arts, which is clearly your background, and the gymnastics and the you can see there's this whole plethora and kind of different movement modalities brought together. And actually, as you said, like taking someone from who can't move really, and I kind of, my background is similar-ish. I'm not martial arts and gymnastics, but of how I try to teach is like take someone who can't move, they can walk just about, and then actually give them, getting them onto all fours, getting them onto crawling, getting them into, different locomotive patterns. And when I came across GMB, it kept popping up. And I was like, I'll check it out. And I loved vitamin as just the way it broke it down. And, perhaps we can dive into those 5 Ps, because actually I think those really are like the foundation of why I think it works so well. And why, as far as a methodology for those who maybe have never practiced a body weight way of moving, why
Right.
even over something like animal flow, or even over,
Right. Yeah.
floor work, kind of that, the floor technique or floor work, whatever you want to call it, kind of
Yep.
floor dance.
Yes,
Why,
exactly. Exactly.
GMB to me was like my intro to like floor work. It kind of broke down so many different
It's great
things
to
that
hear.
gave me
It's great to hear.
more reach. So perhaps if we look at those 5 Ps as a starting point, then we can build out from there as to how,
Absolutely.
stuff
Absolutely.
goes.
So in order to kind of look at that, I think something that would be good is actually to take a look at a kind of the structure of GMB, if you will, in terms of how it kind of came about. So I mentioned my background in gymnastics and martial arts, as well. I have background in yoga as well, and also fitness. So in Japan, my main martial arts at the time were kendo and judo, and so I was primarily doing that. I worked at a martial arts complex. That was my job. I worked there for 8 years, which was within a Japanese shrine. And my job was to actually help to translate as well as interpret for the martial art instructors in that complex. They're Japanese. And so I would attend all of these classes, whether it be Aikijujutsu, Daitoryu Aikijujutsu, whether it be a form of karate, Kyudo. I had the opportunity to train in all these different martial arts. My focus, though, really for my personal thing was my judo and aikido. And it was looking at how can I simply move better?
Mhm.
So that has always been my thing. And I just wanted to bring that up first. Now, years later, met my business partners, Andy Fawcett and Jarlo Ilano. Now, Andy Fawcett's background, so we're all from martial art. That's what
Okay.
kind of unites us, if you will, which unites us as well. But whereas my background is more along the lines of, I would say, the coaching aspect of it. In GMB, I am the dancing monkey. That's just an easy way to look at me. Okay, I'm the guy who does all the tricks and coaches people. Andy, his background is in education, and so he's very good at saying, okay, here is how we set up the method, the system. This is how we're going to organize X. Now, Andy is which sounds kind of funny to say this because we never thought we would reach the size of the company that we are. Currently we have it. Currently is 15 full-time employees, which is like crazy, but
Crazy.
he is the CEO of the company, which again sounds kind of like weird. Jarlo's background is in physical therapy, and so very advanced degree in physical therapy, working with thousands and thousands of patients over the years. So he's looking at through a clinical lens, if you will. He brings that in. And so when we're looking at assessments, when we're looking at what is actually happening within a movement, we are able to break things down in a way where it's not just from a clinical point of view, it's not just from a coaching point of view, not just the educator's point of view, but being able for the three of us to get together and say, okay, how can we take what we have here and basically share with people in the simplest way in order to give them what they need. So it's interesting if you know, in GMB, I don't use a lot of anatomical terms.
No, yeah.
There's a reason for that, is that would kind of pigeonhole us into a certain place where it could actually be off-putting to certain people who just simply aren't used to that sort of thing. If you're a yoga instructor, if you're a coach, if you're a trainer, you have that background. You know, when I talk about anterior pelvic tilt, exactly what I'm talking about. But to the lay person, you'll kind of just be like, all right, he just said something that I think I know, but I'm not quite exactly sure. And so
which
what
way
we
is
do
it?
is yeah, exactly. Right. You're like, well, anterior, you should know. But yeah, we don't want to get into that. And so what I'm getting at is that when we looked at creating a method, that was extremely important for us to make sure that it covered all the bases. But my big thing is, how can we use less in order to achieve more?
Mhm.
That's really huge. So when you're looking at anything in GMB, in any movement, the cues that we have are, we could talk about external and internal cues, but the thing is I want to present and coach in a way that's going to allow a person to immediately understand what needs to happen, and that particular thing give them the biggest bang for the buck. So
Yeah.
for example, instead of saying, interior, come back to the anterior pelvic tilt,
Yeah.
and say, let's, tilt your pelvis this way, and then have you extend here and therefore, and whatever. I could just give one cue, and I could just say, push your butt up into the air. And that could actually give that person the things that we need. Now, the reason that this is important is so that when a person is actually going through our programs, they're learning the method, but it's not being force fed to them.
Yeah.
So coming into the 5 Ps, I just wanted to kind of clarify that the background and where this is all coming from. So a lot of people, might come into GMB and just see a video on Instagram and go, oh, that looks cute. Hey, that's really cool. But I do want to say that there's a lot of science backed up behind what we're doing here, but it's not just science. There's a lot of just experience here too, where I'm just like, I'm not going to science it too much. I'm just going to be like, this works for the thousands of people that I've put through. Say, hey, just kind of try it. So looking at the 5 Ps though, I'll get right into it. So the 5 Ps, we wanted to break this down, and we're kind of irreverent, by the way. We like to have fun. We're not kind of just your average people who are just trying to sound smart.
I don't know if it's the same for you guys. I was once told by one of my by a yoga teacher I know. He was like, we take the yoga seriously, we don't take ourselves seriously. And I thought that was kind of perfect. Do you know what I mean?
That's it, man. And my thing is, life is too serious to be taken seriously. So that's my thing. And so, what you see on the videos is like, this is me in real life. And so I just want people to just be like, hey, let's try and enjoy this, because it's going to sound horrible. Some people are going to be like, oh my God, but dude, it's just fitness. Okay.
Yeah.
It's you know what, it can change your life. It can change your life, but let's first try to just enjoy it. And my big thing is this. There are 3 things. It first needs to be safe. It secondly needs to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
Then the third thing is educational. So you got to learn something. But the thing is if it's not safe, you're not going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you don't enjoy it, you probably won't learn. So with that in regards, we are actually an education company. We're not a fitness company. So the 5 Ps are what allows a person to safely work through a practice session. We don't call it a workout, a practice session, in order to become better acquainted with their body and learning skills that will carry over and help them to get stronger, more flexible, and control. I should just get into it. This is getting long drawn out. I apologize for that.
But no, go for it. That's good.
We got the first P. And the first P is prep. And so for us, some people might call this a warm up. We specifically say that you're preparing yourself, because what you're doing is in each session, you're focusing on one particular skill or 2 particular skills, depending on what that day is. And you brought up vitamin, depending on where you are in the world. And one skill, let's say that it is a forward roll. And today you're going to work on a forward roll, whatever that might be. Well, what I want to do in your prep is make sure that you are properly prepared to start practicing that movement. That's where the prep comes in. So therefore, the prep might change in every single session.
Yeah.
Today it's a forward roll, and we know that's going to focus on the neck quite a bit. And that's also related to your hips, rounding the back. So what I want to do is make sure that you're actually prepared and warmed up to be able to start working on a variation that's going to be good for you during the session. So that's the prep. Prep can be anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes to 10 minutes, depending on what you need. And that's extremely important, because each person is different. And on the platform that we use to share all of this, we call it Praxis. For those of you who don't know what Praxis means, it means practice. That's why we call the platform Praxis. Okay.
Right, see what you're doing there.
Praxis. See?
Yeah.
And so our platform is Praxis. And you can choose the length, duration of your session that day. You can choose anywhere from like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 to an hour. Now, it's all adjust for you and says, if you're going to do like a 45-minute session, then your prep will be excellent. Well, after the prep, though, you go into the practice. So the second P is practice. And practice is where really everything is. It's because instead of thinking that we should always be working out, if we could reframe the way that we look at anything we do and simply look at it and say, I am just practicing.
Yeah.
This can take a lot of stress off of us in thinking that we have to be able to do something. And so instead of seeing a particular movement, you see on Instagram and you're like, you try it and you don't get it. Okay. Yeah. And then you feel bad, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I can't do this. And I'm a horrible person. And therefore it ruined your day. No. Okay. Right. It's like, hey, come on. It's all good. Let's just take a movement and look at a couple variations of this movement, and we're going to practice. We're simply going to bring awareness into our body. And what that means is I'm going to give you certain cues and certain things to focus on when we're practicing this. And as long as you focus on one of those cues and you have a better understanding of that cue, and when you're doing it, it feels comfortable, then congratulations, you just had a successful session.
Yes.
And by doing more practice, you will get better, period. That's just what it is. When I was in gymnastics, when I'm in martial art, I've never asked my instructors, how many of these should I do?
Yeah.
Because it was always, you just practice until you're able to do it.
Yeah.
And that to me,
that kind of reframing,
for a lot of people, right? It can be frustrating for a lot of people, but if you reframe it, it actually allows you to explore. Mm-hmm. And exploration is actually the third P, but we don't call it exploration. We call it play. Yeah, we call it play. And play is actually something you don't find in a lot of people's workouts. You actually don't find practice in a lot of people's workouts either.
Get in, get it done, get out.
Exactly, right? So the practice portion of it, by the way, is always going to be dependent on that day. I can get into auto regulation later, but basically it's just because you did a handstand yesterday and your handstand yesterday was great doesn't mean it's going to be great today, because handstands are finicky things.
Oh,
and
God,
like
I hate
that
them.
with anything, if you expect your movement to be the same from day to day, then it's only going to frustrate you. So basically be where you are that day.
Yes.
And just focus on a cue and control what you can control, learn from it, and you'll always be progressing and making progress. So after practice, though, we move into play. Play is simply looking at something similar to that thing that you practiced that day, but a variation of it that you're extremely comfortable with, so that you can safely work on moving a little bit outside of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
So you're kind of going outside of the box. And what I mean by this is, let's say that, for example, you're practicing on, this sounds silly, but how to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, and this is in vitamin, as a matter of fact, we look at a way of walking and we turn. When you're turning, you walk. You practice on that turn, and where does the foot go? Where should I be looking? My shoulders and hips follow the neck. So where you look, if you look to your right, your shoulders start to move to the right. Therefore, your hips start to move to the right. You practice and get more familiar with that. Then in play, you can actually go in and say, all right, now I got that down. What if I were to do this? And it's still in a realm of, you're not getting too funky. You're not going to say like, what if I put a back flip in the middle of walking? I mean, it's nothing extreme like that, right? But really what it does is it allows you to start to think beyond these blinders that you might think you have when you're like, I want to get this skill.
Yes.
And instead of thinking that you just get that skill, you can understand that it's just way beyond the skill.
Mhm.
It's allowing you again to explore. And I think that the more that we are able and open to explore, I think for one, the better not only in our movement is going to get, but the more it's going to allow us to see the world in a different way. And
Yes.
so that's also extremely important for me. And I'm not going to try and say if you do GMB, that's going to change your life and the way you view the world. I'm just saying that
No,
in
I
my
just, I,
personal point of view, I do believe that if you like what you train is what you become.
yes.
And I even have written on my website, you're a product of your training.
Hmm. Yep.
So the way you train is pretty consistent to how you look at certain things. So we
A
start
bit
with
like what you
prep.
said, just on that note, though, a bit like what you said, though, if your training or your workout ends up being like, smash it out. I don't really want to do it, but I've got to rush in. I've got to rush out. I'm going to do it in 20 minutes and I don't want to do it. That's kind of setting you up for your entire day of being like, I just got to get in and get out and do it. And I hate doing it, but it's just what I have to do.
Exactly. Everything becomes rushed. You're
Yeah.
frustrated because you're like, I just got to do it. And you're not setting yourself up for success, to be honest.
No.
So yeah, it's man, I could talk so much about
The
the
psychology and
mindset of that, right? But we've got the prep, we go into practice, and then we go to play. Now, again, play, by the way, always happens using a variation of that particular movement that you're very comfortable with. Practice happens at the beginning because you're focusing on taking that level higher. And so therefore you always want to work at a fresh level. So coming back to the handstand, let's say you're working on a handstand, you wouldn't want to put that at the end of your session after you lift weights. I mean, that would be silly because it would be dangerous. You're going to be tighter. You're not, again, you won't be as fresh.
Yeah.
Right. And so you always want to practice at the highest level possible, giving yourself plenty of rest between attempts, which is important to use that, not repetitions, but attempts of a particular skill, making sure that each time that you do it, that you can do it. I don't want to say with success, but do it in a way where you can continue to learn about that skill.
Yeah.
Play, though, is where you kind of bring it down a little bit, where you're really comfortable with something so that you can start to move outside of that box, but still do it in a way where you're not going to break yourself. Now, the next thing that we have then is push. This is where the majority of people live in their workouts. This is where we literally say, okay, you're going to push yourself now. Now, push yourself can be both physically and mentally. I think it actually should be both, but this doesn't mean that you're killing yourself. And this is where a lot of people misunderstand sometimes what we're after here. And they have two thoughts. They think, well, in GMB, they don't really push themselves that hard. Yeah. And then the other thing is that they think, oh, well, in push, this means that I can do it until I throw up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I say to both of those is no, in GMB at least. And so when we move into the push section, push are using movements that you have mastered, and I need to clarify what mastery means, but movements that you've mastered that you know that you can safely perform during a duration of time and keep very high quality form. And so mastery to me simply means that you have control over the movement and you are very comfortable in, if something were to happen, being able to safely catch yourself. So this could be, for example, even if you were in a lunge position and you were performing step back lunges, if you were to shift slightly and feel yourself start to roll your ankle, you would know how to respond because you have so much exposure in using that particular skill and you're so comfortable with it and have done so many different variations that you're like, oh, I'm cool. And you just come back to catch yourself. Yeah. And that's what I mean for that. And so you wouldn't want to do for your push session. I mean, like, let's say that a shrimp squat, let's say a shrimp squat, for those of you who don't know, it's a single leg squat where you have your leg behind you and you're holding onto your foot. you squat down using a single leg, and you touch your knee to the floor, and then you return back to standing. It's quite a difficult move for a lot of people. You wouldn't want to use a shrimp squat if you're still having trouble with lunges. Okay.
Yeah.
It would be silly to think that. So what I mean is, in this, mastery to me is the Japanese version of mastery is simply where you've done something so many times that you have a very, very thorough understanding of this particular thing. It doesn't mean that you're done and you never need to study it again. It just means that each time that you do it, you go further into it and you gain a better understanding of it.
Yeah, I love that.
That's mastery. Okay.
Yeah.
You'll never master anything. Okay. There's simply the mastery of what you've done today. So in push, we need to make sure that we're using a movement that we have mastered so that we can continue to perform that movement with high quality of form for a duration of time. Notice I didn't say repetitions.
Yeah.
So this is also very important. And the reason for saying that is that when we focus on repetitions, we sometimes only try to get that repetition, even through sacrificing form.
I was going to say, yes, that's good. Yeah.
And I don't believe that's helping us to get stronger, improve our flexibility, nor our control. And so when we focus on time, it allows you to properly focus on being in the moment in that repetition. And my saying is, do one repetition as beautifully as possible and then try to do another one.
Yeah.
And, let's get rid of reps. And I think repetitions can be extremely useful when they're used in a way where we're focusing on the quality of form for a particular movement, and understand that if we aim for 10 reps, it doesn't, again, mean that we're a bad person if we don't get 10 reps that day. It simply means that we didn't have it in the tank that day.
Yeah.
It's still cool. And so then maybe drop down and drop
this
down.
For me was one of the great things about GMB is that there's not the focus on like sheer quantity. Actually, it's the idea of taking your body wherever you are, and not only as like everybody different, like strength and mobility and whatever else wise, of course, but like on a day-to-day, everyone will be different day-to-day. Exactly. and being able to, and as you said there, we've kind of, some of the skills we've kind of mentioned here have been quite advanced, handstand, shrimp squats, but actually when you look at, and this was the cool thing for me about certainly when I was coming into this idea of training a bit more, and my yoga practice became more movement, I guess, was the idea of just, the simplest of drills, of skills. A skill is like a lunge, a skill is a step, a skill is a pencil roll. It can be the simplest of movements, but actually if you are paying attention, that's where you can really learn something about your body. And you mentioned about how some people go, GMB don't push, let's say, and I having worked through it a lot, I could see how if you weren't paying attention, you could perhaps think that, because some of this on some days your skill is, as you said, go for a walk, and you can kind of end up thinking, what the fuck am I paying for here? Do you know what I mean? Like, he's telling me to go for a walk. How is this going to get me stronger, fitter, more mobile, whatever else? But actually, it's the stripping back, and I assume this comes from all of your martial arts backgrounds of like, let's go simple. Let's take it right back and pay attention.
Exactly what it is.
And yeah, I love that about the GMB.
Thank you so much. That's actually what I was going to reference, was something through my martial art there. And that is that I remember when we first were looking at elements, I had a gym here in Japan that was called the Jungle Gym, and it was focused on children. And I basically just built it for my two kids. They were very, very tiny. And I just basically wanted them to climbing ropes, and we had a rock climbing wall and mats.
Amazing.
And it was just like a lot of the movements, pretty much all the movements, if you look in GMB and you look at, vitamin, elements, which is the bear, monkey, frogger, and the crab. These are movements that I would do in warm up for judo.
Yeah.
And the emphasis when we were doing that was a warm up, but there were people who couldn't actually perform the movements.
Mm-hmm.
So I was typically the guy who was like, my instructor was like, Aaron, go help him to work on a squat. And I was like, all right, that sort of thing. So with the kids, though, what I'm saying is that when they were working through that, it was fun. And I built everything off of that. So even elements, if you look at the movements and you look in there and you say, wait, this program only has 4 movements, the bear, monkey, frog, crab. I don't see it as that. When I look at a bear, I don't just see a bear walk.
Yeah.
I see a person strengthening the shoulders, the hips, the legs, the ankles, the wrists, in order to start moving towards more advanced skills. Handstand push-ups, looking at the monkey. That is a proper squat foundation, but not just a squat, but in motion. That's actually going to help you to get up and down from the ground. It's going to help you to traverse laterally. It's going to look at placing the hands on the ground, traversing laterally, therefore strengthening the wrist in a side-to-side motion, which most people don't really think about too much. Same thing with the ankle. So when I'm looking at that, I also see a cartwheel that comes out of that, because once they have that. So this is me taking the simple tai sabaki, which in English, I got footwork, like a body movement in martial arts, where you're looking at a single step forward. To me, if you get that down and you're rooted into the ground, and I know I can't say that in Australia because it means something else, but if you root yourself into the ground, I always get in trouble when I teach in Australia because they're like, no, you can't say root. That means something different. And I'm just like, okay, well.
My wife will get that one too.
Yeah. But if you imagine using selective tension in your body and being completely aware of not only how you're stepping forward, but with how much force that you need, and the placement of your feet. Are your heels slightly off the ground with your knees bent, hips facing forward, shoulders neutral position, hands up in front of you, elbows tucked into the side? I'm talking martial art, but that is the posture, if you think about, that is extremely natural for all of us. And the better you get at doing that, the better your judo is going to be. Yep. This is better, your karate is going, whatever it is that you're doing, that's just martial arts. So what I'm getting at here is, the basics to me can be extremely advanced. And so a lot of people, and this is for my trainers, and by the way, the 5th P, just so I don't forget, is ponder. And this is very important. And ponder is simply, after you perform your session, you go in and you say, all right, what went well? What did I learn? And then you say, okay, what is something that I realized that I need to work on for the next time? And that's it. It could be like 30 seconds. It could be a minute. You simply ponder and you reflect on the session. And remember, if you learn something from your session, you have been successful. If you will never have a bad session again, ever in your life, if you reframe it that way. Ever. And so you could be lifting weights. What did you learn that day that's going to help you for the next session? Congratulations. You just crushed that workout. So that's how I look at everything now. And that comes from my martial art training, because there were days when I got on the mat and I would go into the Osaka Castle. So inside of Osaka Castle, there's what's called Shudokan, which is martial arts training hall. And it's only for the black belts in judo and kendo that get to train there. And I was like the only foreigner there. And, whenever I would go, and they would like literally use me to sweep the floor. I mean, I was just getting pounded, and that also sounds bad. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I was also getting thrown all around and submitted and all this stuff. And if I had looked at that as, damn it, I just had the worst session. I didn't throw anybody. Never did that. I was like, holy crap, this police officer threw me in this way that no one has ever thrown me before. And I kind of figured out like what he was doing.
I can now defend against that potentially in the future.
Yeah, I can defend it. Yeah, maybe I couldn't do it right away, but just that little nugget that would allow me to continue forward because I reframed the way that I looked at that. And so in that way, when you're looking at particular movements, you could take a single movement. Louis West has one of the most incredible videos ever out there. It's called Floorgasm. I believe it's 11, maybe 12 years ago that he put it out there. Louis West. Floorgasm. I remember listening to an interview with him and I loved it because he said, a lot of people are only looking at the next progression of a move, the next progression. I just did a forward roll on the floor. Therefore, next is a dive roll. And then I need to do one from a handstand. And then the next one, I got to do a front flip. And the next one, double front flip. He said, you know what I do? He says, I take a single movement like the forward roll. And then what I do is I explore and I say, how many different ways can I get into that forward roll? How many different ways can I get out of that forward roll?
Yeah.
So rather than looking at things in terms of moving up, he would expand laterally. Mm-hmm. And so the breadth and the width of his understanding and mastery of that single move further allowed him not just to get better at that move, but everything else, because he was going outside of that box and looking, okay, how can I add to my repertoire of movement? That's always going to help you. This is what I'm always trying to look at is what are the elemental pieces, elements. That's why they're called elements, okay? That can allow a person to start to explore not just movements, but carry that over into their own body by using the AAA framework. And the AAA is you assess where you're at and you be realistic with that. I can't squat today. That's perfectly fine. You're not a bad person. Just understand where you are, because then you address the issue. Why are you having trouble? After assessing and notice that you're in this position, ankles, maybe it's hips, whatever, it doesn't matter, okay? Because what we're going to do is we're going to use these movements in order to get you into position safely. It's going to allow you to enjoy moving. And hey, by the way, you're going to learn that you're going to squat better. Oh my goodness gracious. That is the application. So you assess, address, apply. The application is simply doing the work. And a lot of the thing is people don't know what to do, because you go on YouTube and there's a gazillion videos that telling you the 5 hacks to get a squat or, whatever. And sometimes, you know what it is? Simply doing the thing.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm coming back when we're looking at these foundational movements, the elements. People look at basics. They're not sexy sometimes, but I think they are the sexiest, because by really getting so good at these basics, so good at them, it allows you to see
the access
things that you might not have seen before. Right.
And so with those kind of elements, then, as you kind of said, just like, I think they are, as you say, especially for someone like myself, who I went from being yoga, and I've kind of always been a bit more outside the traditional. I mean, I trained Ashtanga and then went through other bits and pieces, but they never really suited me. I was always a bit more, I wanted to be slightly more expressive. And I always loved the idea of, I could see, I actually was probably even around that time, see some of your videos that you was going around on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever else in the adverts, and the way you kind of moved across the floor. And I was like, it's kind of like yoga, but in 3D.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It felt like
exactly what it is. Yeah. No, you're right.
And really those elements, and at the time, certainly I hadn't really come across the idea of bear, crab, those kind of monkey ideas. So as just an idea for people, can we perhaps just dive into the basis of what those 4 main things are, and perhaps I forgot to ask you, but or not ask you, but tell you, because I always forget, and then I just throw it on people as a surprise. towards the end, I'm going to kind of just perhaps chuck out there for like, if you can offer a little piece of simple something that people can do to take away, a little 5-minute tip, which it might be something to do with these, it might not. But I think as far as if people are new to the idea of perhaps groundwork, as we might call it, or floor work, or just quadrupedal like locomotion or whatever else, these 4 are really, as you've called them, the elements, the elemental, the building blocks of so much stuff, especially if done with attention and awareness. So if we were to go through starting, perhaps you've already mentioned the bear, but like chucking out what that is exactly, and then, you know, we don't have to go into crazy details because people can always find you, because I'll put all your stuff in the show notes, but people can come find you for actual video things. But perhaps why each of these things can be beneficial for us to improve our movement, flexibility, strength, but actually like our movement in life, if you like, which is kind of what this is all about.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're looking at these 4 movements, and why did I choose these 4 movements? So first off, we have bear, and our assessments are static positions. So it might look like yoga, but I want to be very clear that while I trained yoga for a very long time, we want to move away from yoga because we don't want a person to think that a position should be a certain way. This is extremely important because it has to be simply about where you're at, period. So the first position is an A-frame. And the easiest way to think about this is place both of your hands on the ground, place your knees on the ground and your toes on the ground. So that you're in this table position, quadrupedal position. And I would just like for you to keep your hands on the ground, shoulder width apart, toes on the ground, shoulder width apart, and just push your butt up into the air as high as you can. You end up in this semi-A position. So this is why we call this the A-frame. Now, what we're doing here, and use this as an assessment, is simply to see what's going on in our body. Are your legs bent? Are your shoulders? Is the angle of your shoulders? What's going on there? Okay. Do you feel tension in your wrists? Are you able to put your heels to the ground? Now, whenever I do a seminar, which I haven't done a very long time, thanks COVID. Is I'll bring 3 people up. So we'll have like, I don't know, 50, 60 people in this seminar. I'll bring 3 volunteers up, and I'll say, hey, I just exactly what I just said. And I'll say, hey, I just want you to put your hands on the ground, feet on the ground, blah, blah, blah. And I have 3 of them. And I'll say, okay, push your butt up to the air. And I'll say, okay, which one is correct? A lot of people will look, and I purposely bring someone that I know that's kind of a yogi. And I know it's just going to be like super flexible, just like, oh, wow,
steep A,
you know, like sweet, you know. The majority of people, they're like that one. And I said, all right. And I said, they're all correct. The reason why is because, again, it's where you're at. So this is what we're trying to get at. So that's our assessment. Now, then we take that and put it into motion, and this becomes the bear walk. So the cue that I gave there was butt up into the air. That's literally the cue that I use, butt in the air. Just keep pushing your butt up into the air. Now, why would we be doing this? Okay. When we put it into motion, what we're doing is we're alternating hands and feet as we're walking forward, locomotion. Okay. Now, there's so many things going on in this movement alone. We're looking at scapular elevation. And for those of you who don't know what scapular elevation is, I think I lost you. Are you still there?
I'm still there. I think you've just frozen your video for some reason. I can still hear you, so just keep
Sorry
going.
about that. Yeah. So scapular elevation, we're looking at simply if you were to stand up and you were to take your arm up in the air and try and touch the ceiling and extend your arm as much as possible. What's happening is that you're elevating the arm, and so it's elevation in terms of the scaps to your shoulder blades are moving, and movement of the shoulder blades is extremely important. And a lot of people have trouble with the mobility of their scaps. By pushing away from the ground, when in motion, you're strengthening the scaps as well as actively moving in and out of this position as you're performing the bear. So that's just one example. It's quite simple that can actually help you again to strengthen as well as work on flexibility and the control of using your shoulder blades. You're also looking at the position of the wrists is where you're not fully loaded on the wrist in a 90-degree angle. So if we look at, for example, the push-up position, a lot of people have trouble with that because they don't have the wrist flexibility as well as strength in order to place themselves in a position that's going to safely allow them to perform a movement. The bear is a position where, because it's at an angle, you're slowly, gradually working up mobility, strength, control in the wrists to be able to further load in a position working towards 90 as you work through the program and elements. So all of this is taken into consideration. And so that we're really trying to work on making sure that you're moving towards doing this in a safe manner. Now, the other thing too is the movements that are in here are very wrist intensive.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people actually don't spend a lot of time on the wrists. And so what we're trying to do is build a person up to be able to do that. Now, lots of other stuff going on. If you're looking at the bear, pushing the butt up into the air is actually going to help also to, elongate the hamstrings, which flexibility, right? So, and then also control, looking at the calf muscles, posterior chain, everything is working on there. It's going to help. So that's just one example of the bear, and that's the most basic version. Second thing that we're looking at is I ask you to get into a squat position. Now, what is the correct squat position? There is none. When it's unloaded, I think this is very important that want to make clear. If you're loading with a barbell or something, then I do believe that you should be in a certain position, because you need to make sure that your body can handle that load. But our ultimate goal, what I want for everyone, is to be able to get in and out of any squat position while moving. And so first, though, we need to check and assess where your squat is. So I just say, hey, let's get in a squat. If you have trouble with your squat, it's totally cool. I give you some assessments to figure out if it's your ankles or if it's your hips. Then some other movements to help you to work on to do that. But then from that squat position, we front load the body. So basically, when you're in a squat position, you place your hands on the floor and they're slightly to the side, loading the hands a little bit, and then you hop yourself over laterally. So this is the monkey. And so again, you see some examples of this in elements, and we give different examples to show that every body is different. You might not have the ankle flexibility. You might not be able to squat down into a squat. Hey, that's really cool. Here's some variations, some adjustments that you can
heels off the floor, on the balls of the feet.
Exactly. Balls of the feet. Exactly. A lot of people, though, to be honest, will see a movement, try it, think they can't do it, and they won't try and perform it. Our thinking is that if you can actually safely get into a position where you can move, then you should be working on that movement. By working on the movement is going to allow you to get better, not only at doing the movement, but also increasing the depth of the movement, which equates to better flexibility, which of course means that you're also working on the strength and the control when you're performing the movement. So that's the monkey. Next one up is what I call Frogger. This is kind of a throwback to when I was young, kind of aging myself. There was an old video game called Frogger where you would hop from log to log. Most people don't know that. But anyway, basically you're just doing a Frogger. And so this movement where you're traversing forward from a squat position, but you're going through a floating tabletop position. A floating tabletop actually comes from the starting position before you're getting into the A-frame for the bear. So you're in the quadrupedal position. You have hands flat on the floor, arms straight, armpits facing forward, index finger facing forward, pushing down and away from the floor. Again, looking at the scaps. You have your hips over your knees, shoulders over your hands. So these 90 degree angles with the toes on the floor, hands, knees, toes, shoulder width apart. And then from there, push down and through the floor, rounding the back, then let your knees float just slightly off the ground to see if you can do that. That is a floating tabletop. This is not only looking at the core. A lot of people are like, well, I feel in my abs. And I'm like, great. We're looking at a lot of different things here. We're looking at placing our scapula in a different position to see if we have the strength to be able to actively engage our bridge between the upper body and lower body, which is the core, and see if you can actually hold this position just slightly. And then from there, we work on actually pulling the legs forward into the squat. So it's not just, being in a squat, putting your hands on the floor and jumping into another squat. It's can you actively engage the core? And this is a pulling exercise. A lot of people miss out on this. And so a lot of people look at elements and say, you know what, man, it's bear, monkey, frog, or crab. That's cool, but you don't have any pulling stuff in there. And you need to put in some pull-ups or some chin-ups. And I'm like, all right, dude, totally get what you're after. But if you really know what we're trying to get you to do in elements and really get it, there's a lot of pulling involved. Okay. Yeah. So, that also builds as we go, but that's looking at going in that from that tabletop position into a squat position, which is an active pull using the hip flexors, strength, flexibility.
So it might start with perhaps like as you're pulling, almost like pulling like right foot, then left foot, or eventually maybe getting into a hop forward or whatever.
You're just walking. Exactly. You're simply walking yourself forward, and that's where it starts with everything there.
But again, coming back to this idea of like, this is so good, that what I love about the elements and like is just this. And I find so many online things miss the breakdown so much of like, you really can be anyone and kind of access these movements.
Yeah, I don't talk myself up too much, but I will say in GMB, our specialty is can break down a movement for pretty much anyone.
Yeah.
And, why are we doing this? How can we modify it? And a big thing with me comes from, it used to be for me, I would look at a person and say, how can I take that person down and tie him in a pretzel? Mm-hmm. Now is, how can I do the reverse of that? How can I take a person and help build them up? So breaking down these movements just to the core components, and really, I've been lucky, I started in my early 20s working and coaching people. And, my part-time job in high school was I was on the gymnastics team. And before team practice, I taught all the kids classes. So it's like looking and working with all these things.
All of the bodies.
This is it. That's all I can't do anything else. Like,
off a shelf, you're screwed.
Decide to get rid of me, I'm screwed. Like, this is all I can do, guys. So, but breaking things down and really trying to say, like, what's going on in this movement. But coming back to crab, yes, this is our final movement. And so this will have us actually in a supine position. So basically we're in a sitting position, but we're not face down. So with the other movements where you're looking at the bear, the monkey, and the frog, you will actually move more towards into a prone position where you're facing the floor with your belly, whereas in this case, your belly is going to be up in a supine position. So in this case, your hands are right next to you on your hip, by your hips, your fingers facing out to the side. Reason for that is that a lot of people have trouble if they were to put their hands forward. Again, this 90-degree position is very difficult for a person if they don't have the range of motion. But the other reason for having the fingers facing out to the side is to allow a person to get external rotation of the shoulders to be able to open up the chest. So there's a lot
so many people have got that flexed spine, don't they? Do you know what I mean? Exactly. In day-to-day life.
Exactly. And really, once we're working on the crab, incorporating the feet and learning how the body works and traversing forward when you're in this supine position, which is very, very foreign to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And so being able to actively push down and through the ground with that external rotation of the shoulders, as well as having a soft elbow so the arm is not completely locked out and jarring yourself. So it not only teaches all the movements that we're doing, not only teaches you, just how to do these weird animal movements, it's actually teaching you how to better engage with your environment. And that's huge for me, is a lot of people don't know how to address the floor with their hands, with their feet. A lot of us wear shoes all the time. I really encourage people when they do elements to not wear shoes, because you learn how to grip the floor. You learn how to like, oh, if I
Place.
just smack my foot down, it hurts. Yeah, because you've had shoes on for so long and your feet, have forgotten how to do that. So hands are the same thing, like walking and rolling the hands as you're walking, learning how to incorporate good breathing patterns when you're doing this. In other words, don't hold your breath. Don't grimace, and learning how to read that as you're going. And so elements, it's pretty involved. But we really, I try and break it down so that even though we do throw a lot at you, it's not like a fire hose of water just
yeah, for sure,
in your face. So vitamins, another great example where it's a completely different program, because where in elements you're following along a program that is taking you from just the very first steps all the way to being able to do these crazy movements after 43 sessions. Vitamin is just like, hey, here's a movement, try it out today. And the reason for that is that where in elements, we're trying to educate you in terms of how to use progressions, using the assessments, using the 5 Ps to work through it. Vitamin is simply about exploration and trying to switch your brain so that you're not thinking of nailing a skill. You actually create this pliability in the brain. After you finish vitamin, you're going to look at another movement in a different way, and you're going to see it in terms of, you know what, I kind of see what's going on here. And it's not as scary as it was before. And wow, I've only practiced this movement once, but when you go back to it many sessions later, you might be able to do it. And you're like, oh my God, what's going on? Well, that's because what's happening is you're now learning and changing the way that you view things, because you've reframed the way that you now view movement. So lots of,
and without getting too philosophical and mindset-y again, hopefully that's the kind of mindset which then allows us in life to begin to reframe how we look at stuff. And I really hope so. Yeah, I do personally believe that that is the case. Like, I do think the more you can have attention and have awareness about how you move and begin to play around things more, stuff just becomes that little bit less scary and terrifying. And then you kind of can realize that, whether it be trying to do a handstand, trying to do a bloody planche, planche, whatever you call them, press up, whatever it might be, actually it can then translate into your job interview, your whatever it's like. I've stressed the shit out of myself in certain ways, in really accessible ways. I've built up my level of tolerance by doing what I thought was terrifying, and actually I broke it down so much that now stuff in life isn't quite so scary as well.
Yeah, the volume in life gets turned down because you realize that things are attainable, because you've looked at them in these small chunks that are doable, right?
Yes.
And so, maybe now I could finish off with my
if you've got, what have you got? So
which is related, and this is actually something that I like to say. You hear this from a lot of people, but they use it in a different reference. And what I'm going to say is embrace the suck. And a lot of people, when they say,
again, be careful here, guys. We've already had.
They're like, God, this Ryan guy's dirty. He's horrible.
Nailing, and
a lot of times, at least, I'm obviously originally from the United States, so my English is pretty bad, because I came over to Japan for university, and it was all in Japanese, and so I only spoke Japanese for quite a few years. So anyway,
it's fine. I love all the innuendo. It's fine. I love the innuendos.
So embrace the suck. A lot of people look at that as something is just going to be very, very difficult, and you just got to suck it up and push through it. And if you throw up, you throw up, and whatever. My way of looking at this is that when you're working on any new movement or skill, you are going to suck in the beginning. You're going to be very bad at that movement. Embrace that. The faster that you can say, you know what, this is new, so I'm not expected to be great at it.
Yeah.
If I give myself pressure to think that I should be able to do this and be great at the movement, then I'm missing out on the opportunity of learning. So when you can embrace the suck, when you can embrace the fact that you're not going to be good at something in the beginning, it takes off that pressure and allows you to start enjoying what you're doing. This is very common if you look at a person, let's say, if a person, let's say you're listening to this right now and you're relatively new to, for lack of better terms, the movement world. You see these people moving around on the ground and doing these silly animal looking things. And you're like, that kind of looks fun, but you're just like, I don't, and then you go to the gym to practice. You get embarrassed because you're not very good. And, you know, other people at the gym don't do it. They're doing their bench presses and things. Or what are they going to think of me? If you can actually move beyond and just embrace the fact you're going to suck, then you're going to get good.
Yeah.
Because you're just doing it. And what's the most important thing about any of this is to continue to do it. That's it. And when you know, if you want to learn how to play guitar, sorry, you're going to suck. You're going to suck for a pretty long time. Okay. But you know what? If you can just learn how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb and get a little bit better at it, it's going to sound better. Your fingers are going to start to feel better because you're going to develop those calluses. Your hands are going to start to move better. It's going to start to sound like a real song. Then you're going to be able to start piecing things together and having even more enjoyment out of it. So embrace the fact that you're not going to be good at something. This can be applied to literally everything in life.
Everything. That's what I felt.
My kids, this is what I tell my kids. I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old. And, you know, they're at that age where, especially my daughter, you know, she was an athlete. She was on the junior national swim team, and she'll do other things and expect to be as good
she's at swimming
at that thing as she was at swimming. And I'm like, sweetie, no, it doesn't work that way. So this is one thing that I am lucky that I'm constantly reminded, and I can remind other people because I'm surrounded by people who are just coming into this, and we see this all the time. And it can get very frustrating when you see these particular things, these movements that they look like they should be easy and they're tough.
Yeah.
And what I suggest is, hey, just embrace the fact that it's not going to be good the first time. Just stick with it and smile.
Yeah. Smile. I love that. I love that.
That's it.
Amazing. Well, I literally can't believe that we've gone through an hour. I say that every week. Well, most
that
weeks.
Was fast. Wow.
It was super fast. But thank you so much. Before we do go, obviously, I want to try and direct as many people as I can to your stuff.
Thank you.
So where can people find you? Where can people find GMB? If people have listened to this and they want to know more about either elements or perhaps vitamin, or, I mean, guys, the GMB program, there is literally stuff for everything. Like there's kind of parallettes, there's ring work, there's, you know, whatever it is that you want to try and master. Hopefully you'll have kind of got the idea that Ryan breaks this stuff down pretty fucking well. So you can you know, anything, any kind of movement that you've kind of always dreamed of doing, you can probably learn it through GMB. So what's the best place that people can find you and GMB and whatever else?
Very easy. Go into the interwebs. It doesn't matter if you're on Google, YouTube, Twitter. I think we even had a TikTok account for a while. GMB Fitness. It's not Good Morning Britain.
No.
It's originally gold medal bodies, but we don't go by that anymore. It's GMB Fitness. And just type that in there. Check out the YouTube stuff that we have. We've got a gazillion videos up there for free that will cover anything you want. Don't buy any of our stuff until you've used some of the free stuff so that you can get a good idea of what's going on and see if it's good for you. You can always send us a message at howdy at gmb.io, and a real person will answer you.
That's amazing. Well, I personally can highly vouch for, and even from my own perspective of most people listen to this will know my background and how I move and whatever else, but even from my perspective of being an experienced, inverted commas, mover, I definitely still took a lot away from vitamin and from elements. So I've kind of, they're the two ones I've kind of mainly played with. And I definitely took plenty away from them. And I know that when I did my PT training last year, that the main trainer there was a big advocate of using you and like a lot of your stuff as ways to break stuff down for their clients. So yeah, this is definitely.
I will say real quick, if you do decide to get a program and you're just beginning with all this stuff, I do suggest starting with our GMB mobility program.
Cool.
That I think that is a fabulous place really to start. It's a good entry level thing, if you will.
Perfect. Yes. Lovely. Well, I'll have a little dig through and I'll put that in the
thank you
as if you want to start, that will be a place to start. Well, thanks guys. Hope you all enjoyed that one. Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm going to hit the old stop button here and we'll
my pleasure.
see all you guys soon.